You know, at Scale, we always want to show you something or some things that you've never seen before and you may never seen again. Jacob Collier is a multi-instrumentalist, singer, arranger, composer, and producer based in London, England. Hailed as one of the most prodigious and creative forces of his generation, Jacob's self-made viral YouTube videos are what first introduced him to the world and caught the attention of Quincy Jones, who promptly signed him to his record label. Collier's debut album, 2016's In My Room, won 2 Grammys and features Collier singing, playing, arranging, and producing everything on his own in his childhood room in London. The success of the album led to a one-man show world tour, collaborations with everyone from Herbie Hancock to Hans Zimmer to Snarky Puppy, performances with the likes of Pharrell Williams, a TED Talk, headlining the BBC Proms, and much, much more. Jacob retired the one-man show and is currently on a national tour with his band, which I got to experience last Friday. It was indescribable. For Scale, we actually pleaded for Jacob to reassemble his one-man show to show how he uses technology, instruments, and voice to create original works of art. Man, you are in for a treat. Playing the song that got him discovered on YouTube, please welcome the incomparable Jacob Collier. Yeah!
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, guys.
I've known Jacob for a few years. We were introduced through a common friend, and I've seen the growth from when you're at the Broad stage in Santa Monica to your one-man show to last Friday. And last Friday really blew me away. First of all, how old of a man are you?
I am 24 years old. 24 and a half, actually. 24 and a half.
All right, so a couple years older than our undergrad students. And at the concert on Friday, I was with someone who's here, Mike Catone, who's accomplished musician in his own right, you know, Eastman, Juilliard, and the Monk Band at the Monk Institute. And the first thing he says to me is, there's 2,000 people there, all standing, and he says, this is probably the hippest audience you'll ever see. And I didn't know if he meant hip cool, and he goes, no, this is the most knowledgeable music audience you'll ever see. And I didn't know what he meant until you asked people how many musicians were in the audience. Did you see the response?
Yeah, I always do that. I say, how many musicians in the crowd? And then you see how many people put their hands up. And it was like 80% of the room or something like that.
Yeah, 70-80% of 2,000 people are musicians. And you really know that when he says, after a song, how many beats in a measure, and the entire crowd says, 7. It's not even a normal time signature. So I realized I was in sort of elite company. And I asked a couple of musician friends, Daniel Weidlein, who graduated from Thornton a couple years ago, and he wanted to ask you, how do you balance performing for a core audience who is just so steeped in music theory and the complexity, and they understand how difficult what you do is, and then still appeal to a broader base and build that sort of larger audience?
It's a fascinating question. I mean, I guess to start off, I'm definitely a massive introvert. And I don't know whether you guys are a massive introverts. Anyone an introvert? All right. And for me, being an introvert, I spent most of my childhood days in this little room in North London, which is the same room I still make music in, just designing things musically. Like, how would it feel if I did this or this or this? And how can I tell that story? I never thought about going on tour. And I didn't think about having a career, for sure. I didn't think about building a brand or any of that stuff. I just thought, well, I'm going to concentrate on making the most beautiful stuff I can imagine and just growing as a human being through that process. And kind of almost by accident, it was like, I guess I might be having a career right now because people are listening to the music. And that was amazing and a real blessing, but not something that I necessarily planned. And so a question like, how do I balance, appealing to the masses with regard to the things that I want to do? How can I balance those two things? It's a question I've only even considered very, very, very recently, comparatively recently, because I've only ever been concerned with making sure that the things I'm creating are authentic to me, and the things I'm creating are things I care about. And I think there are lots of people, musicians included, who create things that they don't necessarily care about because they're hoping it's going to scale conference, and people are going to get excited. But actually, I would say the most important thing is just to do things that you really care about. And all of these notes and chords and rhythms is part of this great big language, and the language is what I care about, much more than the career aspect of it. That's almost like a bonus, I suppose.
Yeah, and those things apply whether it's music or the arts or business. I mean, do something that's authentic to you and that feels right, and the audience or the customer will come. Well, speaking of storytelling, we had Brian Grazer here earlier and Haley Kiyoko to talk about storytelling. You often talk about music as a language and as a device for telling stories, even without lyrics. Can you explain what that means, and maybe show us what that means in terms of how you tell a story with chords and music without words?
Yeah. I can definitely do that. So all of us have been listening to music for a few years, I would imagine, right? Do you guys listen to music? It seems like you do. Okay. So if you've listened to music, then you'll be familiar with certain things and unfamiliar with others. So if I play this chord, for example, then a lot of people might think, well, what on earth is that sound? And if I play this chord, then you guys might recognize that as a chord, or even a major chord, if you realize that there's a major chord and there's a minor chord. But the amazing thing about music as a language is that you can play with expectation in a similar way to the way in which you can with English or any other language. But I can lead your ear somewhere, harmonically speaking, towards a resolution, and I can interrupt that resolution with a strange sound or something that's more unfamiliar, and then when I get to the resolution, it can be even more rewarding. And I suppose when I think about storytelling, you think, okay, I'm in a key, like this is C major, there are 12 keys, there they all are, and this is one of them, C major. And so if I go, let me see, if I go, right? Your ear hears, okay, I'm in this key and I'm going to depart and I'm going to return. So I've established a home base, I'm going to go out and then I'm going to come back in. Now, the thing I'm fascinated by in terms of music is thinking, well, okay, if everyone in this room, whether consciously or subconsciously, is expecting what if I take this note and I do something random, but in a way that the melody is the same, but the chords have changed, which might sound something like this. Right? The melody is fine, and if you were all singing along with that happy birthday, you wouldn't be put off because the note is the same, but your ear is surprised, and so that thing of going home or going somewhere unusual, that as a premise can be stretched to a whole number of different degrees. And so when it comes to telling stories, whether it's with language as we know it, or the language of music, or even the language of marketing, sometimes it's that element of surprise that will gain somebody's attention, but it's surprise that's grounded in not the idea of I want to get your attention just for the sake of it, but I want to trick your ear into realizing this is possible. Isn't that strange? And actually then I might lead you home, and when we get home, we've learned something from this weird journey. And this happy birthday example is a rather whittled down version of what could be a much longer conversation. But I love playing with surprise. I love playing with expectation. And it's extraordinary nowadays to be able to rely upon a sort of unconscious musical intelligence of almost everyone on earth and work with those as your materials, I suppose.
Yeah, people know more about music than they give themselves credit for,
sure,
even when they're not.
yeah.
You could lead them, and almost everyone here could finish the end of a sequence. When you think about technology, this is sort of a tech summit, and certainly heavily reliant on tech, and a lot of people in tech here. How do you combine tech? Technology often separates us as humans and disconnects us emotionally. How do you use technology as a tool that doesn't get in the way of music, enhances it, but still connects us emotionally to each other?
It's a fascinating question and an absolutely essential one. The challenge with building this show, which is the show with which I toured all over the world for 2 years, was how can we make a show where there are multiple instruments on stage, acoustic instruments like real keyboards and real pianos and real drum kits, but not make the technology that brings them together feel like it's getting in the way, because if you're not careful, live looping shows can be super draining, because you see, 1, 2, 3, 4, stop, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, stop. And so with this show, I had to very, very clearly to myself, I suppose, define what my priorities are and what my priorities were. And you have to let technology do things that technology is best at doing, and let the human do the thing that the human's best at doing. If you try and teach a computer how to be a human being, it's not particularly the most efficient way of doing things, right? Because a human being is very capable of storytelling, for example, being emotional, interacting. And what computers can do is they can define a system in which human beings are able to function in a more effective way. And sometimes, certainly with music, people can get a slightly skewed idea of what the role of technology is. And sometimes with music, people think, well, technology should be making our lives easier all the time, cutting corners and writing the music for us eventually. But my personal feeling is that the human touch with music is what makes music so special. And in the same way that you wouldn't have necessarily computers or technology trying to teach you how to speak English, if you're listening to computer-generated music entirely, then you're missing that interaction that we share as musicians and as human beings. And so technology, I feel, is always best when it's kind of invisible and you don't need to know it's there, but it's aiding your momentum. And so it's kind of up to each of us as, first of all, as consumers, but also as developers, to define our priorities. Do you want to be more human, Or do you want to hide behind the technology and define yourself in a filtered environment? Because both are absolutely possible nowadays. You can certainly be a human being with technology in your hands, but you have to define that to yourself. Otherwise, if you're not careful, you'll be swept up in that tide of, I can be defined by all sorts of things and I'm not, you know what I mean? But I think it's just about seeing things as clearly as possible and realizing just how powerful technology can be with the right thing at its helm.
Yeah, and I think the humanity and emotion in your music comes through, even though we know you're using a lot of technology in your music. You are a prolific songwriter and composer, and yet some of your sort of most memorable performances are reimaginings and reconstructions of other tunes. This is for everybody, both there's the younger set and some who may be a little bit older. Tell us how you take a sweet melody written by Burt Bacharach for the Carpenters and make it crunchy and different in your own. Maybe you can show us instead of tell us.
I can, yeah. I'll play the song, in fact, for you. I'll play the song Close to You. Do you guys know the song Close to You? Why do birds suddenly appear? You know the song? Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a Jacobian rendition of said song. Thank you so much. Thank you guys.
Just look around. Hey, Lloyd, you recognize that song? You know that song, the original one. You know it. That was for you. That is just incredible how you just recreate a new work of art from something that's already existing. It also shows that a good song does sort of live over time, and a good song is a good song.
It will survive that kind of skullduggery. Right, yeah.
I want to ask you two more questions and then and take us home with one final song. In your current, where you talked on Friday's concert about your 4-album work, Jesse.
Yeah.
And if you could share briefly what that is. But one thing that caught me while I was talking, you talked about the importance in whatever we do to remain childlike. Can you share what you mean by that and how it applies to all of us?
Absolutely, yeah. In my estimation, and in my experience, when I became an adult from being a child, and when I looked around at people becoming adults from being children, there seems to be it seems to be easy to lose this sort of essence of what it means to be alive. There's no reason to be alive, and adults think there is. They think that the point of being alive is to achieve something, or to gain gain something, or to arrive at some kind of destination. That's not how life works. You begin your life, and there's no reason, and you end your life, and there's no reason. And so I think that the tragedy is that people think that life is a very serious thing. I don't believe life is particularly serious. It's very important, but it's not serious. And it's a real privilege, but that doesn't make it serious either. And so it's something I've been thinking about. I'm making this 4-album. It's like a quadruple album, 45 songs, all to be released over the course of a year. And it's like every single musical genre under the sun. And I've been traveling across the world, seeking out all my favorite musicians in all these strange and unique cultures, from kind of traditional Moroccan music to Portuguese music, to music from Mali, to hip hop, and singer-songwriters and folk singers and guitar rock heroes, all sorts of things. Been chasing these people down, and the album, which is called Jesse, it's a celebration of this ideal of a childlike spirit. Jesse is this kind of childlike spirit that hangs on the whole journey, and I just think it's important to iterate that and to stop thinking that at the other end of this long journey that we're on by being alive, there's something in particular that there is to gain at the end, because it's one of the greatest illusions, in my opinion, of education and industry, is that you begin and there's always something that you need to do that's more than what you are already. Like you need this one thing in your life, or you need to be promoted, you need to climb, you need to be achieving all this stuff. And actually at the top of that ladder is your death, without meaning to be extremely morbid. And I would just say that you should, by all means, climb, by all means, strive, by all means, reach, by all means, inspire. But you have to look around every now and then and think, well, I'm already absolutely enough, and I'm already here, and that's cool. And I'm going to speak whatever language I'm used to speaking, and I can learn, and I can grow, and I can enthuse, and I can, all of that stuff. I can fall in love, and all those things that don't take that striving thing. They take you being in the present moment. And that's okay. And it's okay sometimes to look around and be like, I'm alive. All right, fine, that's cool. Rather than, I'd be alive properly if I just over there, And so, those were my thoughts. I think that children are the wisest among us because they don't consume themselves with this feeling, or at least they haven't been made small enough yet to believe that they need to be made bigger. That makes sense.
It's wise for your age, and those are some of the things we try and tell you. Please, it's very wise, and we actually try. Even as a college, we still try and instill that. We have this Performance Science Institute where we're training and teaching and researching mindset. And the idea of tying yourself to a purpose instead of an achievement is going to lead to a happier life. And
right, absolutely.
We wish for our students that they learn that earlier, like your age, instead of my age, because you're going to have a happier, less anxiety-filled life. Let's before your last song, I just want to finish where we started, which is Quincy Jones. For the younger people, if you don't know Quincy Jones, you have to look up. That's the most prolific, successful producer, arranger of all time. More Grammys, more Grammy nominations, the most albums sold between Michael Jackson and scores of artists. And at the end of your show on Friday, I got to spend a little time with him, a quiet time, and we caught up, so thank you for reconnecting us. But also, he just kept saying 24 years old. And he said, if that's the future of music, it's in good hands.
Oh.
And the last thing he said was that you remind him of him.
Really?
Which I don't know if there's a higher compliment.
No, there isn't really. No.
So can you talk about the influence he's had on your life and how he's available to you in your career?
Yeah, I mean Quincy. If you don't know Quincy, you've got a lot of homework to do. He's an extraordinary man. He started as a jazzer in the 1940s, 1950s. And played in every big jazz band in the world. He went on to arrange for people like Frank Sinatra and Ella Fitzgerald, these great jazz singers. Most of us know Quincy through his work with Michael Jackson in the 80s. He produced Thriller, which is the greatest selling album of all time. And he then went on to kind of be the first person to mangle hip-hop with jazz, which became everything that is now going with people like Kendrick Lamar and people who are putting all these genres together. He was one of the most courageous people kind of ever to have lived. And he came out of the south side of Chicago extremely poor, and he's grown into this extraordinary figure in many fields. And I'm just so lucky to call him a friend. It's one of the incredible things about being a millennial, I suppose, is that if you have an idea that you spend enough time with and you put it there and it has potency, then it will find the people it needs to find. And I made these little videos at home with lots of little Jacobs in boxes and playing different instruments and things like this. And the videos just kind of traveled on their own, and one of them found Quincy. And I've been so lucky to find time over the last 3 or 4 years to spend time with him and just listen to his stories, because he's such a wise person. And, you know, he's one of the greatest examples of someone who puts humanity at the center of everything he does. It's all about the human being behind it. He always says, you can never be more or less as a musician than you are as a human being, which I would say translates to anything that we do in the world of business, or in the world of language, in the world of education. You can't put on a mask for too long, because your essence will shine through. And so the sooner we can look at our own essence and embrace it and go, the better everyone's experience is going to be, because people are used to striving for people who aren't real people. And I think that you know, Quincy is one of these people that's put himself on, you know, he wears his own skin very proudly, and he's inspired people to do things that they want to do, not things he wants to do, but things that they want to do. And that's such a cool thing to inspire, you know, rather than say, do what I'm doing because I'm doing it right. Just to say, do what you do what you want to do what you could do, because I did what I could do. You know, I always think he's one of those people that speaks so eloquently about this and is this kind of living example of, you can go from here to here just by following your, as he says, following your goosebumps. You know, just thinking, that feels good. You know, and ending up somewhere where you have an enormous business and enormous leverage in the world as a human being, but you're still in your own skin. I mean, there's no higher order than that, in my opinion. So he's like the top cat.
Yeah, soak it up, all the wisdom. Well, before your last song, I just wanted to thank you for bringing joy to our conference, to our lives, and for wearing cardinal pants.
Thank you very much.
I almost wore the same thing, but Lloyd said I couldn't pull it off. So you talk about going somewhere and take us home. Take us home with one last song. One last time for Jacob Collier.